I'm joined by Elliot, financial planner. And Elliot, how long have you been with United Advisors now?
I've been with United Advisors for around 4 and a bit years, something like that, potentially coming up on 5 years.
What are we talking about today? Financial awareness. And we do a lot of these workshops during our physical events, and they're very well attended. And normally a lot of people afterwards want to have a chat with one of the guys to look at like what they could do, especially in these times, because we know that a lot of you are either without a job for a minute, or you might have a decrease in wages, or you're waiting for it, but some of you might have savings. There's a lot that to be done, but I'm pretty sure that Elliot will touch base on that. So that's what we're doing today. I want to give the floor to Elliot. So Elliot, please take it away. Enjoy.
Brilliant. Thank you, Onno. I am, of course, here to talk to you about financial awareness. And this is a really interesting subject matter for Crew, because Crew are in an incredible position to do amazing things with the money that they do earn. We work really, really hard for it. And that's a lot down to, high income roles and low outgoings. So that typically leaves people with surplus cash that they can do exciting things with. It's just knowing what things to do and at what time to do them. And the problem that we see quite often is that Crew have they're either time poor, knowledge poor, or a bit of both. And that's where we sort of come into the fold, where we want to help you on that financial journey. It may well be that you're just starting your financial journey for the first time, and you need the full suite of services as it is to get yourself going and on the right path. Or it may well be that you're quite well advanced upon that journey that you've taken, and you want to have a little bit of a health check and look into how you've been doing things to date, and can you be doing things any better moving forwards? And we always do have these conversations best in a one-to-one environment. Obviously, for the purpose of today, we want to give you a bit of a flavour of the sorts of services and the sorts of things we do help out with. But obviously, please do, if you've got any specific questions or queries, we're here to have these one-to-one sessions after we've finished here. And everything is 100% confidential, so it's a case of the more open, the more honest you are, the more you're going to get out of the process. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, a bit more about who we are, what gives us the authority and the credentials to be able to be sat in front of you and a partner of Crew, traveling to all the different locations and giving these sorts of sessions to people. I think it's really important that you know that we are able to deliver that and deliver it with confidence. We want to obviously talk about how Crew do with their money. That may well be money that they've already amassed, and it's sat there maybe in a 0% interest bank account of some description, or it's we're looking at to the future to say, how can you make more of the money that you will earn moving forwards? We're also going to touch upon your financial personality. Maybe wondering what does that mean? Everyone obviously is different. They've got different personality types, and those different personality types will ultimately reflect on the decisions that you make, the financial decisions that you make. So we want to address, if you understand which category you fit into, it may well help you make better decisions moving forward. And then key considerations. This is sort of key questions as well. So ultimately, things that you can take away with you today, which you may be able to implement yourself and should have quite an immediate impact. Then last but not least, who wants to be a millionaire? So what do we need to do to make €1 million, just as a fun thing to look into? So who we are. So this is us, this is the team, and this is the team that's based here in Palma, Mallorca. And so yeah, we are exclusively focusing upon super yacht crew within this division of the business. We think that that's really important as well. With it being such a unique industry, there are lots of unique problems that come with that. And with us dealing with people, crew day in, day out, we're used to addressing those sorts of problems, and hopefully, we've got the solutions to those issues. What we quite often see is that crew will maybe go to family members or friends who are not in the industry and don't really have that in-depth firstly independent, unbiased advice, but it's potentially not applicable or not the correct advice for someone working in the sort of environment that you will be. We also have years of knowledge, years of experience, and we share that experience collectively. And we're also part of a wider group, which is called the United Advisors Group, which is headquartered out of Luxembourg with offices throughout Europe. And again, really big on knowledge sharing, and we're utilising all of those years and all of that experience to make sure our deliverable is as good as it can be for our clients. So in terms of then going towards how we go about helping Crew, there are these three pillars, we call them, of sound financial planning. So the first one here is banking, what people often get wrong. So we'll be talking a bit more about that. We'll be touching upon tax, but that really isn't our area of expertise. We have partners that we work with from a tax perspective, and that obviously depends on your country of nationality or country of residence at that time, and they'll be very much specialist in that area, so we can partner you with the right person if you would like us to, and then we incorporate that into your overall documented financial plan. The last but not least here is the savings element. This is where it starts to get more interesting, more exciting, and we can start to plan for the future and some of those key goals and aspirations that you've got moving forward. So the first section here on banking. So let's use Standard Bank, the seafarer's account, used account within this industry. Some people have not had great experiences, some people have had fantastic experiences, but it doesn't really matter for the purpose of this example. It's a good multi-currency account. It's exclusive to seafarers, and it holds, so you can hold up to 4 currencies, so pound sterling, less relevant usually, but also euros and US dollars and Australian dollars, but the two main currencies that people get paid in. And it's really important that people do get paid in the same currency as what they're earning in. Quite often we see people who they're not even fresh to the industry. Some people have been in industry for 10 plus years, and they're still, let's suggest maybe they're Australian, South African, British, whatever, and they're getting their US dollar salary paid into their rand account, and then they're spending back in US dollars, and it's money essentially. With one of these multi-currency accounts, it's a good, easy solution to that problem. And also, when it comes to the Standard Bank account as an example, it's pretty much representative of most accounts out there. It's a 0% interest account, where you can see on the screen there it says no interest. So it really isn't it's not designed as a savings account. Also, from an inflation perspective, so for anyone that doesn't know or is not aware of inflation, inflation is just the general rise in prices. And in a normal environment here in Europe, it's about 2.5% to 3%, something like that. And it's going to vary. It's going to depend on where you're from as to what that is. But for the purpose of this, and I've got some examples, we're going to use that figure. So in terms of getting the best returns upon your savings, figure of 20,000 euros that's sat in your Standard Bank account at 0% interest. With inflation 3% in Europe, that means a 600 euro reduction in the value of your money per year, which again is just wasted money. So also here, if you were to do an investment of some description, even with a very low risk and estimated growth of 4%, that would equate to 800 euros worth of growth in that same year. So always good to have a emergency fund, which again varies from person to person, but we recommend between 3 to 6 months worth of salary as your emergency fund and in your Standard Bank account or equivalent. But then when you're starting to think further down the line in terms of savings and investments, you really want that money to be growing for you, not just stagnating at 0% interest. So an example here to start to bring future financial planning and retirement to life a little bit. So there's an example here of John. He's 30 years old. He's a bosun. He's earning 4,500 euros per month. So he would like to be financially free in 25 years' time. So the age of 55, he wants to stop working and say, right, I've done a good time in the industry, and I want to now receive 2,500 euros per month. That's in today's money. What we then need to factor in is inflation, because to have that same spending power of the €2,500 per month, it will need to be a higher amount. And we in turn, we'll actually come on to that later. So he will need to generate a master fund of €1,254,000 in order to receive that €2,500 per month at the age of 55. Okay, so how does he get there? By saving €2,000 per month now, starting at the age of 30, in a cautious portfolio of 5% return, give or take, he could accumulate €1,170,000, leaving him with a shortfall still of, but a small shortfall of €84,000. We're going to assume that, I mean, over the course of his career, he's going to continue to improve and progress in his career, having higher levels of disposable income, and this won't be his sole savings. There's going to be some there. There's going to be potentially some other things which needs to be taken into consideration. But now, just on to take this and just to sort of iterate how important it is to start to save as soon as you can. If John waits another 10 years to the age of 40 before he starts contributing to his retirement, he'd like to be still financially free at the same age of 55, but now he's got 10 years less of saving time in order to achieve that. Still wants the same monthly income at 55 of the 2,500 per month. He'll need to create a master fund of €936,000 to have that same 2,500 per month in today's money. So if he were to save the same amount as the previous example of 2,000 per month for the next 15 years at the same 5% return, he'd accumulate 426 cents to be specific, which is quite a significant difference from what he could have done previously. If I just go back, just to remind everyone, if he'd saved 2,000 per month at 5%, he could accumulate 1.17 million in that 25 years time. If he waits, and it's only 15 years, then he would have saved 456,000. So leaving him with a shortfall of 479,289.34 euros. So he's quite some way off where he needs to be. Okay, we've got a bit of a graph here to start to show this in a bit more detail. So slightly different parameters here, but this is still this is a monthly savings required to build a €1 million pension and retirement fund. Let's call it retirement fund. So along the bottom here, age 60. And then you've got the amount of money on the left-hand side. So if you're starting to save at the age of 20, and this is for retirement age, at the age of 65. This is not for retirement age at 55 of the previous example. But so if you were to start saving at 20, €360 per month would allow you to achieve that amount of €1 million saved by the retirement age of 65. If you start at the age of 30, then it would be €700 per month, 40, 1,435, so on and so forth. So the point being, if you are in a position to start to save sooner rather than later, then it certainly makes it that much more, that makes it that much easier and that much more realistic to achieve that €1 million goal, should that be a goal that you indeed set. So here for this section, this is about your financial personality. And as I mentioned at the start, what we want to get down to here is ultimately, how would you categorize yourself? There's lots more categories than what I'm going to present and show to you today. However, this is just a bit of a flavor to start to get you to think, and perhaps you fit into one of these categories, perhaps none at all, perhaps there's a different one, and perhaps there's more than one. But then we want to understand, okay, what difference does it make actually understanding and knowing what personality type you are, and what impact does that have to the financial decisions that you make? Yeah, why does it matter? So this cute little guy here, he is what we would call a squirrel saver. So we come across quite a few people like this within the industry that just know that it's something that they should do. Perhaps it's come from parental influence. Maybe it's something that the mother or father has done and that's just been passed on. But some of the pros to being this type of individual is that they're typically quite reserved, quite frugal, quite conservative with their decision making. They are long-term thinkers, again, not with any specific goal in mind, but they're just thinking usually about the long term. And they believe that they are financially secure. And they may well have a large amount of money saved within their 0% interest standard bank account or equivalent. But in terms of the losses or the returns that they're getting off the money that they've saved, it's not like it's invested in property, it's not necessarily invested in any other particular investments, it's just there at 0%. They lack some direction and they'll get low returns on the saved money. So just to bring this to life a bit, if we identify that someone is a squirrel saver, then we want to be able to help them, to give them some direction and maybe take some risks, but some very well considered, very cautious risks that will still give them the comfort they require, but it will start to beat inflation and generate them money over time. Okay, definitely come across a lot of these people within yachting. So these are the risk takers. So look, there's a lot of pros, but there's some quite serious cons with people that are risk takers, and they need to be managed in a certain way. And if you are one of these people, then it's definitely good to be aware of that. So some of the pros: levels of fear, quite curious to new opportunities, open-minded, and the potential for large returns. However, on the flip side, so usually quite impulsive. Those impulsive decisions can be quite destructive, and there's a much larger potential for significant loss. So these are the sorts of people that potentially were investing in Bitcoin, or maybe they still are, or some other cryptocurrency, or what is often perceived to be a bit of a attempt to get rich quick kind of thing. But not all the time. That's sort of on the extreme levels of thing. And people have made, if we take Bitcoin as an example, they've made huge returns in some cases, but also significant losses in others. So if you're willing to take the risk, then the rewards are there. But we would advise to do that with caution, and that would be part of the strategy that we would also do. Okay, this guy, he is a thinker, and he is what we call a procrastinator. So someone that is sat back and they're watching what others are doing before acting themselves. So they're usually quite cool, calm, considerate, and composed. But on the flip side, they will quite often postpone and delay and miss some opportunities as a result of that. So with feelings of potentially being overwhelmed, feelings of pressure, and fear of failure. Okay, so here we have a dreamer. So the dreamer, they are big picture thinkers. Obviously, they dream big. They want to, very much live the high life, and they're usually very much ambitious. They do, a big picture thinkers. They really think small. Some of the cons, they don't act upon some of the plans that they've got in the backs of their minds when they are daydreaming. Putting those ideas into an actionable plan to make those dreams a reality is often not one of their strongest suits. So again, really important for us to know that, to start to help them define that and implement it. So yeah, typically lack of focus for detail. They definitely need some guidance and direction. And this is the last one that I'll be discussing today as part of one of the personality traits. But again, one that we come across very, very often, and it takes them usually quite a long time for us to actually engage and take the first step. But when they do, they're incredibly happy that they've made that step, and they often say, "I wish I'd done this 10 years ago." And those sorts of people are potentially the head in the sand type of people. They don't want to accept, or they don't want to address anything. They very much live in the moment, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but there just has to become a time where people are thinking and planning for the long term. So sometimes they're not planning for the future because they lack adequate knowledge to do so, to actually implement some things, potentially a bit in denial because maybe they haven't been as diligent as they should have been to date. But taking the first step is going to take a lot of pressure off them moving forwards. So yeah, afraid of potential consequences, and they're often unwilling to listen to good advice. Onno, actually, we've got a bit of a poll here. I'd like to try to gauge with people out there that are watching what category they believe that they fit in from these options, just to try and get an idea.
Okay, good. I'm going to launch a poll, guys. I'm going to ask you: are you a squirrel saver, risk taker, procrastinator, dreamer, or head in the sand? And let's see what you guys say. So let's see what we have online. I guess we let's give you a bit of time to come up. Like, oh, we've got the dreamers coming in. That's a dreamer. There will be more.
Procrastinator, interesting.
Yeah. So at the moment, we've got like 60% dreamers, some procrastinators, 25% squirrel savers. Just keep going. I'll let the poll run for a little bit longer before we end, so that everybody's got the opportunity to give an answer. So these are the results. It's like 10% squirrel saver, 40% procrastinator, 40% dreamer, and 10% head in the sand. What do you take out of that, Elliot?
Interesting. No risk takers. That surprised me a little bit, but no, interesting to see. And the dreamers and the procrastinators as well. I think the procrastinators are a really interesting one because we do see that a lot, and especially in such close-knit environments on board, where you are in the crew mess in such close proximity to one another. There's people that are quite outspoken that have gone through and done some pretty exciting investments, whether that be in property or with whatever it may well be. And people just sit back, listen, watch, and don't really necessarily know the right way into getting involved. They know it's a good idea and they want to do something about it, but haven't quite worked out the best way of doing it. And it's great to see that they're actually here taking part in this process. So hopefully they can, hopefully we can give them some potential guidance moving forward.
Great.
Thank you for getting involved in that, guys. Right, the next portion here, we're going to talk about typical life stages. So there are 7 typical life stages that we would quite often see. Just to touch upon them very quickly from left to right here. So stage 1, newborn; stage 2, childhood; stage 3, teenage years, and starting to think about what sort of career path you want to embark upon. Stage 4. So this is really where the first stage where we would normally be engaging with any of our clients. These are young professionals leaving home and embarking on presumably their career in yachting. They're starting to get their feet under the table, starting to establish whether this career is for them. Let's assume that they like what they're doing and they see it as a career path. Then they're starting to think about property, they're starting to think about marriage, they're starting to think about children, tax, to some of these, because it will vary, it will depend person to person. But it's a very important stage, especially to get financial advice, should it be available to you, because if you can make a strong start within this industry with good habits and good discipline, then you're going to get that much more out of the industry for the long run. So that's something to note. And then so coming on to stage 5, this is where things start to get a little bit more complicated at times, a little bit more interesting though in the same way. This is a yachting professional there's going to be some potentially more complex tax planning that needs to be addressed, inheritance planning, tax planning, so onshore migration, retirement planning, all the slightly more complex things that we'd start to address, but more exciting. A lot of people will make some of the most significant financial decisions that they will ever make before the age of 40. Everything from buying your first house or maybe second or investment properties, to getting married, having children, maybe leaving the industry, starting a business. There's all of these different options that are available to you, but some of the most significant. So, and these are some of the years where you're your least experienced. You haven't maybe done these things before and learnt from any potential mistakes that you've had. So having an independent third party that can be a bit of a sensor check on your thoughts, but in an independent and unbiased way is really important as well. For instance, if you have the same conversation with a family member, they're not going to have that same unbiased opinion as to what it is that you should potentially look to do. And then stage 6 is retirement. Reaping the rewards of all the hard work that you put in through stage 4 and 5. And then stage 7 is passing the torch, your skills and wealth to the next generation. So again, really important to make sure that everything's in place to make sure that that's as smooth and as stress-free as possible. Okay. So the process of how we actually get there. So the first stage, and what is probably the most important stage, is the define stage. As this is us understanding you. So we go through a very regimented process to understand where you've come from, where you're at now, and most importantly, where you're looking to go. And we typically break that down into short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. And this section sort of comes back to that honesty that I mentioned earlier on, to say that with everything that we do, and open and honest you can be, the better, the more you're going to get out of the process. And this is where we're really starting to set out some wealth goals and starting to look about what kind of lifestyle it is you want to aspire to have. Once we've been through that, we move to the second stage, which is the design stage. And this is really where we start to document all of the things that we've gone through and work out a bit of a strategy and a plan to make sure that the things that we've set out to do, are they achievable? Are they realistic? What sort of time frame are we going to do them in? And that will be in the documented financial plan. Once that's agreed upon and documented, then we will move to stage 3, which is the refine and review. So ideally, we really want to be speaking with you every sort of 3 to 6 months, depending on you and the sort of program. 6 to some people it's longer, so it really does depend. But in those sessions, we really want to, this is us making sure that you are sticking to the things that we initially set out to do. So we want to know, has there been any changes in your personal circumstances? Some of the things like, family changes, or, maybe you bought property or some other investment. Has there been any changes in your professional life? Maybe you've gotten a promotion, maybe you've moved boats, maybe you've moved to rotation, anything like that may well have an impact to the way in which we're helping manage your account. And then, of course, during those calls or face-to-face where practical, during those sessions, we, of course, want to be feeding back to you on the accounts that we're managing for you. So, how much has been contributed, what the growth has been, are there any changes that we would recommend making, are there any market movements or anything significant from, an economic level that should so yeah, that's essentially the process that we'll go through. So the duration of our relationship is usually very long. Okay, so these are some of the things to consider, some takeaways for you, and there's actually a handout that we can leave with you after this, which is some of these questions, and then taking it into more detail. So some of the basic things as well. So are you being paid in the same currency as your bank account, which we touched upon earlier? Are you filing a tax return when necessary? Do you have an emergency fund or cash cushion if you lose your job? And I mean, this is incredibly pertinent at the moment with everything that's going on with COVID-19, a very unpredictable, unprecedented incident that's going on globally at the moment. A lot of crew have lost their jobs or are on reduced salaries, and that was if you didn't have your emergency fund or cash cushion in place, then potentially you'd be struggling right now if you have lost your job. And what's even more worrying is that we don't necessarily know when everything's going to be back to normal. So this really does emphasize how important that cash cushion is. But even under normal circumstances, let's say when we're not talking about a global pandemic, is that, you know, yachting is an incredibly transient industry when there's an incredibly high level of turnover of crew within the industry. It's not like it used to be or is onshore when people keep their jobs for 10 years, 20 years, up to retirement in the same job with the same company. People do move around a lot, and there's usually time off in between those, but not always. And it's obviously a relatively high risk job as well, where you can get injured. So really important, that point. Do you set yourself a monthly budget, and do you keep to it? That's something that we will go into detail in our process as well, to understand what your income versus expenses are. And what I mentioned briefly earlier as well about your outgoings, compared to an onshore lifestyle, they're usually incredibly low. So being able to capitalize upon those healthy salaries with very low outgoings gives you a good opportunity to start to do more interesting things. And so, do you have any current savings? Next point is important. Are you getting the best returns upon those savings that you've generated? Do you have a current financial plan, and are you keeping to it? What are your plans after yachting? So whether that be starting a family, creating a business, or just moving back onshore into a more traditional onshore role. But it's really interesting for me to see, because there are certain people that use just to maybe earn a bit of money over a 5-year window, and utilize that to start a business or start a family, or, you know, whatever else they want to do. But there's a lot of talk about these golden handcuffs within this industry, where people have the plan to stay within the industry for a relatively short period of time, but because they haven't planned adequately for the transition back on shore, and they've sort of become accustomed to living in this little bubble, where most things are paid for, and maybe tax isn't, maybe you don't have to pay a high percentage of tax, but in any case, they can't transition back onshore successfully. So then they end up zigzagging between an onshore and a yachting life, and sort of resenting a bit of both. So trying to stay within the industry short term, then right, let's make a plan to make sure that you can exit the industry as smoothly as possible, to make sure that whatever it is that you want to commit to doing post yachting is a success. Okay, then next point is, have you considered your retirement? Obviously, we've been into a fair amount of detail about this already. So obviously really, really important, especially in an environment where I just touched upon tax. Maybe you're not paying any tax or any social security contributions, so you're not going to get a state pension. You do not work for a big corporate, or, you know, in a corporate environment, so you're not going to get a corporate pension. So anything that you do save and invest, that is down to you. It's up to you to make your own retirement. And a lot of people, they seem to want to retire early in this industry, 40, 45, something like that. And if you're really going to do that and be successful at it, then it has to be well thought. Last point here, do you know how much money you will need to achieve all of your goals and ambitions? So really high level stuff, but once we know that, we can at least break it down and do some prioritization there. So I mentioned earlier about tax. So these are some of the partners that we do work with. If you do have any specific tax queries, still put them to me, and then I can make some relevant recommendations. Okay, and now the most important thing. So this is something, again, that you can start to take away yourself. So writing yourself a bit of a check to say, okay, if I want to retire at a certain time, this is what I'm going to need to do in order to achieve that. So I've got a complete, this is just purely for illustrative sake here. So if you write, this is a handout as well, you print out and you can write on yourself. So bank of whoever, if you put your current age there in the next box down, and then the number of years until you'd like to retire. So in this example, this person is 30 years of age, and they'd like to retire at the age of 50 in 20 years' time. So what they'd like to retire on is €2,500 per month. That's in today's money as well, because what we need to do is factor in that inflation figure as well. So the 2,500 per month, that works out as €30,000 over the year. And then if you see in the bottom left-hand selection of boxes, it goes from 5 years to 25 years in 5-year increments. This is a 3% per year inflation rate factor. So if I'm the 30,000 euros per month by 20 years, so it's a 1.8 factor in terms of what we need to multiply that by. So at the age of 50, that will need to be worth 54,000 euros per month to have the same spending power as it does now. Okay, then what we do is we take a cautious portfolio of a 5% growth rate, divide it by 5%, and that gives us our mother fund. So essentially what we need to create to live off the amount that we've stated. So that will create, we need to create a 1,080,000 retirement fund. So if anyone is struggling with going through this, then I'm absolutely on hand to be able to help you start to calculate this. That is it from myself for today. Ono, any questions?
She asked, what type of risks and what impact of it might be during the financial adventure? So what kind of risks are there? What impact do they have?
So, I mean, there are risks inevitably with any kind of financial journey, and a lot of people are talking about what's going on globally at the moment, of course, with COVID-19 and the impact that it's having. There has been a drop, and there has been a sort of some level of short-term pain, but however, we're starting to see markets stabilize and return, and well, we will, of course, in due course as well, see things get back to where they were. So there's always going to be some ups and downs and some bumps that we need to navigate around, and it's our relationship with you to understand what's your acceptability level for risks. Some people very, very small. Some people, the risk takers in the world, they're more than happy to take a higher level of risk, knowing that their potential for higher rewards are there. So it really does depend, and that it's hard to predict exactly what risks and what's going to happen in global markets. But all we can try to do is just be that sort of one step ahead of everyone. And we've got, very smart people that we work with predicting what's going to happen out there. So it's very much a team effort about here. But again, happy to go into some more detail with you on a one-to-one basis with that.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you, Galina. And Megan, how do you account for unpredictability of our jobs in terms of the possibility of losing one's job very quickly, which would mean a loss of income? For example, is there a way to protect against or take into account the salary fluctuation due to COVID or any other situation, obviously?
Sure, yeah, it's a very, very valid question, and obviously very pertinent as it's happening at the moment. And that's why it comes back to that emergency fund and cash cushion that we would always encourage our clients to keep within their account. So Standard Bank, we use as an example, having between 3 to 6 months worth of salary in your account should anything happen, to make sure that you can weather the storm. There isn't really much else that you can do in terms of planning for the unpredictability of the industry, except be as good at your job as possible to the point where they don't want to go rid of you for whatever reason.
Good. Vladimir is also asking us, what currency do you suggest for long-term savings?
It would be really dependent upon ultimately where you want to live and what currency you want. So let's take as an example that you wanted to retire to sunny Parma, and you were earning in euros at that particular time. It would make absolute sense to have your salary paid in euros, your savings are in euros, your long-term investments and your plannings are in euros. It's obviously going to be very dependent for each person. A lot of people, they maybe want to move back to their home country after they leave yachting, in which case we would have to assess on a case-by-case basis to understand what currency you're earning, what currency is best to save in, and then ultimately what currency do you want it to be withdrawn in.
Good. Well, thank you for that, for the question. Giovanni said, do you offer advice on investments such as gold, silver, etc., or simply saving account with you? She's pretty clueless with the finances. Thank God she has a partner.
Gold and silver and some other commodities will make up a part of those funds. However, it's very rare that we'll invest in purely any of those individual things. Again, what we try and do is de-risk and diversify as much as possible for our clients, and by doing so, that means moving the money and putting it in lots of different places to make sure that all of your eggs aren't in one basket. But what we do, and as part of this sort of discovery process and understanding the client, is understanding if they do have any particular sort of favorite areas that they would like to invest in, and on the flip side, if there's anything they absolutely do not want to invest in. And then when we go away and do our research and ultimately come up and find some options for you, then it will be as close to what your preferences are.
Good. And then let's go for the final question from Megan. Are cryptocurrency type investment a part of your financial portfolios?
No, they're not. To be perfectly honest, it's there's lots of people that do incredibly well for them, but again, we see them at the moment as too high risk. We are more of the organisation about planning for more sort of medium to long term, absolutely sometimes of course short term, but we want to be able to really predict what you're going to be able to withdraw and have at a particular time to make sure that the goals that you set out are realised and achievable. We wouldn't have very many happy clients if we were investing in what are considered to be very high risk areas when it gets to the point where they want to buy that property or they want to start their business or whatever it may well be. And to hope to realise.
Good. Given he says that makes sense. Thank you for the answer that you provided to her earlier. That's kind of you, Given, to give that response. And I'm happy, Elliot, that we're like ending it with a very serious topic, but a very interesting topic. I think everybody needs to look after the finances. I would like to thank everybody for joining in today. I would like Elliot, thank you for being with us. Bye bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Great.